Ammon Bundy has been, for the last decade, one of the big figureheads of the kind of far-right militia movement. His big beliefs are centered around beliefs in personal freedom. He doesn't really believe that the federal government should have any say, that the ultimate authority is granted to local and state governments. You know, he doesn't believe that the federal government should have management over federal lands or anything to that nature. And that's a lot of what his feuds with the federal government have been rooted in over the years. So for Ammon Bundy, a lot of his rise to fame or notoriety really started with his father, Cliven Bundy. Cliven is a rancher in southern Nevada, near Bunkerville, Nevada. For years had been in a dispute with federal agencies over his cattle grazing on federal lands and him not paying any fees, the required fees to do that. So in 2014, the federal government, after decades of unpaid fees, came to corral his cattle that had been illegally grazing. And this sparked a feud between the Bundy family and the federal agencies. When the Bundy family put out a call for supporters, hundreds of people from across the country showed up. Many of them were ranchers and farmers from across the West. Others that showed up included people that are from far-right militia organizations, including the Oath Keepers. Ultimately, this led to a very tense standoff between federal agents and these armed supporters of Bundy. The result was eventually the feds released the cattle and everybody kind of went their separate ways for at least a few years. It wasn't long before he was back in the national spotlight for another feud with the federal government, this time at a wildlife refuge in rural Oregon at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. Ammon led a takeover of the actual facilities and turned into a month-long kind of an encampment, effectively, at the refuge. Ammon Bundy had gone there to show support and raise awareness, essentially, for a case of a father and son rancher in Oregon who had been convicted years before for land arson. The Malheur standoff eventually led to an armed standoff with federal agents that did lead to one person being shot and killed by federal agents, and Ammon Bundy being arrested, along with several others. Ammon Bundy would spend nearly 2 years in federal custody in prisons in Oregon and eventually in Nevada as well.
This November, we have one chance to keep Idaho safe from crime.
So a few years after, Bundy ends up in Idaho and in 2022 is running for governor of the state.
Lockdowns and tyranny. We have a chance to keep our children safe from
running as a third party and running on heavily a anti-mask, anti-COVID vaccine platform, and actually managed to do extremely well for an independent candidate, getting roughly 17% of the vote that year. The People's Rights Network was a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially the responses, the governmental responses to it, the mask mandates, the vaccine mandates, restrictions on in-person events and visits, things of that nature. For Ammon Bundy, the government's response to COVID-19 was exactly what he had been fighting against and everything he had been warring against, and what he considered, governmental overreach, mandates, restrictions, all being placed on people in the names of protections. So in Idaho, Ammon Bundy staged multiple protests at the Idaho Capitol, protesting against COVID vaccines, mask mandates, and this eventually led to him getting arrested twice, including a very tense scene of him being carried, or basically wheeled out in a wheelchair by Idaho police. Ammon once again brought himself into national spotlight, this time in a case for his friend's grandson, who the state had removed from their care due to what they said was severe malnourishment.
That baby belongs to the parents, not to you.
A physician from the Idaho hospital system testified in court that the 10-month-old was so malnourished that the stomach was distended and that the child was days away from dying if it hadn't been taken care of. To Ammon Bundy, though, in his view, this was the equivalent of the government kidnapping his friend's grandchild. This resulted in Ammon once again inserting himself into the national spotlight, and what it led to was, according to court records, was a harassment campaign against hospital staff officials that started to upend hospital operations. Some of the people that were there protesting with Ammon Bundy were also part of his People's Rights Network, the group that he had formed to kind of help protest against the vaccine and mask mandates. These protesters were significantly upending hospital operations. They were jamming phone lines. They were sending death threats, spreading rumors, false rumors online about doctors and staff. And this eventually led to a defamation case that ended up in a $52.5 million judgment against Bundy, his friend, and others involved in these protests. As part of these court proceedings in the defamation case, Bundy was charged with contempt of court for not showing up to the case. And this eventually led to him being arrested on contempt of court charges. So when the trial came around for Bundy's contempt charge, Bundy never showed. Bundy sent the court a note telling him that he would not be appearing, and the judge at the time issued a civil bench warrant for him and a $250,000 bond. This is about the time when Bundy fled from Idaho to southern Utah.
They took my home, they took all my commercial properties, they seized all our bank accounts. So we've been living off of a cash basis.
These days, Bundy is effectively on the run from authorities in Idaho, but he's not exactly hard to find. He hasn't changed too much of his lifestyle. He lives in an attic apartment in southern Utah, a house owned by a friend of his. Bundy lives in this attic apartment with his wife, some of his 6 kids, and a grandchild. He says he's in good standing with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He says he goes to church pretty much every Sunday. He says he holds a temple recommend.
When I got here, I settled and wondered what would happen, and I spent my time praying and trying to ask the Lord what he was going to make of it. And I believe that the Lord answered, at least as an understanding to me, that I should just live my life as normal, the best I can. So that's what I do.
Bundy is surprisingly relaxed for a man who's running for the law. He says he hasn't even turned off his location services on his phone. He doesn't feel like he's ever really looking over his shoulder. He's running a business, at least running part of a business out of Cedar City. He's had run-ins with the law. He's been pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt. He had another, not necessarily a run-in, but he helped a woman in a car wreck and filled out a report, included his name. So it's not like he's hiding per se. People know where he is, and he seems to be not really letting it affect how he's living these days. By all accounts, law enforcement in Idaho and in Utah don't really seem to want to find him. The Iron County Sheriff told the Washington County Sheriff, where Bundy is living these days, that he is aware of Bundy's location, but there's been no action. Police in southern Utah say that they haven't received any kind of extradition request or anything to that effect for Ammon Bundy. Idaho authorities say they don't think that they have jurisdiction to extradite him due to the nature of the complaint. We spoke to a former Idaho County Sheriff who said that he believes that authorities are not pursuing Bundy at this time because they're trying to avoid another armed standoff with him. 99 out of 100 people in Idaho are just happy he's in Utah.
We went through 2 major federal trials and they lost both times, and it made them look really bad. Why would they want to do that over this deal? So I just live my life and I take care of my family and I develop this truck part and I live the best I can.
When he fled to southern Utah, Bundy said he prayed for guidance and received a revelation from God telling him to live as normal a life as possible. If he lands in legal hot water once again, Bundy insists he and his family are prepared.